Owen Anderson, welcome to the Philadelphians. Brother, it is about time. I've been following your YouTube page since you were like hiking up in the hills, with your webcam and stuff. So,
Hiking with Anderson. Great to connect.
tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you study? What do you teach?
I'm a professor at Arizona State University, and I teach philosophy and religious studies. So this semester, I'm teaching a class on philosophy of religion and in religion in America. So we're looking at those, looking at in philosophy of religion, look at the basic questions about, does God exist? Why is there evil? What is free will? And in philosophy, in religion in America, is kind of intellectual history of religious development in America. So we're up to the Civil War right now. So getting into religious ideas that influenced the Civil War one way or the other.
Yeah, I love that Mark Knoll book talking about the Civil War as a theological crisis.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to do some shameless plugs while we're talking.
Please do.
One of my books is titled The Declaration of Independence and God. And what I do in that book is I trace some of the major legal cases in the Supreme Court, the United States, and how they were exactly that, theological crises, first and foremost, about the nature of God. So yeah, Civil War, what is it to be a human and God's purpose for us as humans, all of those are wrapped up in there, and they kind of come to a head, different understandings come to a head in this violent conflict.
In every age before this age, everyone thought that whatever your inmost held beliefs are ought to be translating to your public life.
Yeah. Yep.
That includes things like the state should make good law.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we mean by good law? And so when we go about the business of creating a nation like the United States where we have opportunity en masse, right? We the people and stuff, to form this more perfect union, then we actually have a duty to talk about our inmost beliefs and not check them at the door.
We're obligated to do so. Yeah, I think there's something about that where apologetics can get focused on a real narrow view of salvation, which is that you say a prayer to go to heaven when you're dead. And so then that requires, you got to prove certain things to get them to say the prayer, like Jesus rose from the dead and the Bible's accurate. Now, those are fine things to talk about, but the idea is that if you've done those things, then they'll pray the sinner's prayer and you're good about heaven. And this world, you're just kind of waiting it out. And that's one of the things that I really argue against. And it's like a theme through a number of my books, which is that otherworldliness has hindered Christianity, that we should be actively engaged in this life. We should see God's glory revealed in all of creation and history, not just be really what's a kind of Gnosticism, waiting for our souls to go to heaven.
The idea of salvation affects everything. And so, the Bible's true. Therefore, you live like the Bible's true. And you try to build a world one human at a time and one structure at a time towards the end that God envisions for us. Whether that's achievable or not, it's a bone of contention between us, but at least we know we're supposed to be doing the work.
You're supposed to do, yeah. I mean, I'm post-millennial myself, so I think we're commanded to do it, and we will do it. But I have millennial friends, and they'll say, well, they're optimistic. They'll say we'll get pretty close, but we're not going to really do it. And say, well, at least we should both be trying, right? Even if you agree, we'll just get close.
Well, that actually brings me to the subject of your book.
All right.
Because you have this book, 12 arguments showing what is clear about God's eternal power from general revelation.
Yep.
Yeah, tell me about this book. I feel like it's a needful book. I tend to be very sympathetic to a presuppositional sort of apologetics, but as I told a class of Sunday schoolers recently, I actually don't care what apologetics method you use, because engagement with people with the gospel is what gets the work done. But before we plant the seed, we're tilling the soil. So whatever means you have of that, I don't care about. But I personally tend toward a presuppositional approach. But what is this approach that you're taking of natural theology and making a case for it here?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different purposes for the book. One is that I'm a philosopher. And so I'm often around Christian philosophers who have good intentions, but they think that if someone like Aristotle has proven that there's an unmoved mover, that's some big deal. Or they might hear a story of an atheist who converts to now believing there's an uncaused cause. And they think, wow, he's so close now to Christianity. And my view is that it's simply not true. Aristotle was in unbelief, and he should have repented of that unbelief, and he didn't. And the view he taught of God really got put up in the way that Romans 1 describes, in the place of what's true about God. So in that way, Aristotle is more of a hindrance. And yet when you read about natural theology today, and there's some Facebook wars going on between a couple of different people about natural theology, the two sides mean natural theology means what Aquinas and Aristotle did. And they go at it at each other. Did Aquinas and Aristotle have good things to say? I mean, I teach Aristotle's logic. I like how he laid that out. But with respect to his relationship to God, he was in inexcusable unbelief. So I wanted a book that addresses a full definition of God. It's not, general revelation doesn't just tell us that there's an unmoved mover. And so I used the Westminster Shorter Catechism's definition, question 4, what is God? That's the definition of God that I think we can know from general revelation. So that was sort of the first point, is we're responsible for God to know him, and these other philosophers from the past were responsible to God. Then the second one is, okay, well, let's say you agree in theory about that. How do we do it? And that's where the 12 arguments come in. Okay. So what you'll often find with arguments is that someone will say something like this: there must be a moral governor if there's to be morality, therefore God exists. And logically, that's called overextension. Your conclusion tries to grab more than the premise allows. Okay. So when we see that, you'll see my wife designed the cover. I think it's pretty sharp. I have the Shorter Catechism definition here.
Right on.
There's not one argument that gives you that whole definition. I think the definition has 3 parts, really. It has what kind of substance is God? God's immaterial. He's not a material thing. God's a spirit. And then second, the incommunicable attributes of God. God's eternal, infinite, unchanging. And then third, what we might call the communicable attributes that we could share with God, but he has them infinitely, things like knowledge, power, and goodness. So you need arguments that show that definition of God is the correct one. And that's where I think you need about 12 of them. Although the last couple are really doing this. General revelation hands us off to Scripture. This is one of the fears of, say, the presuppositionalists, is they'll say, whoa, you can't be saved without Scripture. And natural theology has a history of saying we can approach God just from nature, and you can't. You need Christ. Yeah, right. I think what happens is really just following the outlines of Romans 1. General revelation hands us off. It tells us God exists. We're in rebellion against God, and only God can provide the solution for our redemption.
Right. So the famous case of Antony Flew,
that's what I was thinking of.
Famous philosopher, right? Everybody thought he was going senile when he abandoned his famous atheism to become a theist.
Yeah, he said explicitly, I believe in the God of Aristotle. I said, okay. That's one of the idols.
Yeah, I mean, paganism's got lots of gods.
It's funny because I host a Great Books reading group, and we're going over Dante this month. And Dante's a great work of literature and epic poem. However, he's also teaching you theology, so you can't just do pure literary discussion. You're finding you're teaching you things, and you find this area called Limbo. And in limbo are people who are not in hell, but they can't go to heaven. And the statement is that they are without sin, but they have no hope. And so in limbo, you find Aristotle, Plato, Suleiman, or Saladin, the Islamic general. And Abraham was there, although Christ, after his death, came to hell and removed Abraham from limbo. But it's this idea that really Aristotle had no sin. He wasn't in unbelief. And I think the reason why someone like Dante can say that is because they have a very narrow or superficial understanding of general revelation.